Okay, so the North American trade landscape just had a major earthquake. We're diving into the CUSMA renegotiations.
Right, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement.
Exactly. And Washington, led by USTR Jamison Greer, just fired what they thought was a pretty confident opening shot.
They laid out this whole wish list for Congress, and everyone, all of the financial analysts expected Canada to just fold.
To go back to that historic position of, capitulating quickly, especially on tough issues like dairy.
That's been the playbook for decades. You absorb some pain, make a few concessions, and you keep that access to the U.S. market.
But the response from Ottawa this time was different. It wasn't just a no.
No, it was a strategic counterpunch.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was asked about the core U.S. demands, and his answer was just 2 words.
Not negotiable.
And that right there, that's the signal. It's a definitive sign that the old way of doing things, that age of dependence, might be over. We're looking at a huge shift in strategy.
A shift you're calling strategic sovereignty. So let's unpack that for everyone listening. What does that actually mean here?
Well, historically, Canadian policy was sort of dictated by geography. You're attached to the world's biggest market, so you play by their rules.
You have to.
You feel like you have to. Strategic sovereignty flips that. It's a conscious decision to use Canada's own essential resources, things like critical minerals, hydroelectric power, all these integrated supply chains, as active leverage.
So you're not just reacting anymore.
Exactly. It's about using your strengths and your global trade options to resist that pressure. Canada is choosing how to engage, not just being told how.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is clear. We're going to look at those specific U.S. demands, which kind of surprisingly seem to show more weakness than strength.
They really do.
And then we'll get into the leverage that this really unexpected partnership between Mark Carney and Doug Ford has created. They're basically signaling that the U.S. might need Canada a whole lot more than Canada needs them.
That's a whole new ballgame.
So let's start with Washington's wish list. When USTR Greer laid out these priorities, what's so striking is how consumer-focused they are, almost like a retail list.
Oh, absolutely. You can see the fingerprints of powerful domestic lobby groups all over it.
Yeah.
And those priorities don't always line up with, broader national industrial needs.
Okay, so demand number 1, the old favorite, dairy access.
Of course.
The U.S. wants Canada to completely dismantle its supply management system. That's what protects Canadian dairy, poultry, and egg farmers.
It's been the cornerstone of the U.S. trade complaint for 30 years. It's a guaranteed political win for them in states like Wisconsin and New York. The goal is just to flood the Canadian market with cheaper U.S. milk.
Even if it guts Canada's domestic system.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
The USTR almost has to include it, or they'd lose political support at home.
All right, then we move to the digital world. Demand number 2 is about digital services.
Right, big tech.
Washington wants Canada's online streaming and online news acts gone. These acts basically make foreign streaming giants and news aggregators contribute to Canadian content.
And pay Canadian publishers for their work. The U.S. also wants the digital service tax dropped for good.
This sounds like pure defense of their monopolies.
It is. It's about stopping Canada, and by extension any other country, from regulating or taxing the huge revenues that American giants like Google or Netflix make there. It's about keeping the status quo.
Demand 3, procurement rules. The U.S. is objecting to provinces like Ontario, Quebec, and BC having buy local policies for government contracts.
Which is a direct challenge to Canada's own industrial strategy. They see any internal preference for Canadian-made goods as an unfair barrier. Again, it's about getting maximum market access for their companies.
And finally, number 4, which is a bit more niche but very visible, reversing provincial bans on American alcohol.
Specifically bourbon. And you have to remember, those bans were a direct tit-for-tat response to previous U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum.
So when you put all 4 together, milk, bourbon, no taxes on Netflix, and government purchasing rules, it's interesting.
The opening U.S. strategy is basically, let us sell you our consumer goods, and you have to accept our digital rules. And you have to ask yourself, if that's all the leverage they're bringing to the table, how strong is their position, really?
Well, it seems like it exposed their limits pretty quickly, because that's the moment Prime Minister Carney made that strategic pivot.
His dismissal of the dairy issue was, it was a masterclass.
He just said, supply management is not on the table, not up for discussion, not open to negotiation, not happening.
That absolute clarity was the first part. It told Washington not to waste their time. But the real genius wasn't just saying no. It was immediately changing the topic to where Canada holds all the cards.
But let's talk about that pivot. How did he shift the focus so effectively?
Well, instead of getting bogged down in an argument about milk prices, he immediately started talking about what Canada actually brings to the relationship.
The integrated supply chains.
Exactly. In the auto sector, steel, aluminum, lumber, and the big one critical minerals, he made it crystal clear these are things the U.S. desperately needs.
And things Canada, as he put it, can sell to anyone on Earth. He totally changed the frame of the conversation from U.S. wants to U.S. needs.
He did. And central to this entire new approach is this really unlikely but incredibly effective partnership.
Carney and Doug Ford. You couldn't find two more different political figures.
On one hand, you have Carney with his economic precision and calm authority.
And on the other, you have Ford with his political instincts, that combative energy, and his connection with, working-class Canadians.
Washington absolutely assumed they could divide and conquer, pit the federal government against the provinces. But it backfired.
That united front really showed its strength when Ford was asked about those alcohol boycotts the U.S. wants reversed.
Oh, his response was just perfect. He pointed out that since the boycott started, wine sales in Ontario are up 65%.
Wow.
Grape growers, distilleries, are all having record years. The U.S. tariffs that were supposed to punish them actually created this huge protected market for local Canadian producers to thrive.
And he said the boycott only ends when, I'm quoting here, the Prime Minister and President Trump come up with a great deal for both countries.
Which is just a polite way of saying, our local businesses are booming thanks to you, and we're in no hurry to give that up for nothing. The confidence is just undeniable.
It seems like the partnership works because it presents two different fronts. Carney is the calm economist with the hard facts.
And Ford is the political bulldog who's ready to fight for provincial jobs. Together, they force Washington to deal with a unified front that they just didn't see coming.
So let's get to the core of it, the actual material facts that back up this new Canadian confidence.
This is where the numbers become geopolitical weapons.
Carney used this incredibly memorable analogy for Canada's aluminum exports. He said they save the United States the equivalent of 4 Hoover dams of electricity.
4. That number is staggering, and you have to think about what that actually implies.
Break that down for us. Why is that so significant?
Well, making aluminum is one of the most energy-intensive manufacturing processes there is. It takes a massive amount of electricity.
Okay.
And Quebec has this vast, cheap, and incredibly stable hydroelectric power. It's the greenest and most affordable energy on the entire continent.
So if the U.S. decided to make that aluminum themselves instead of importing it,
they would need to generate 4 Hoover dams worth of new electricity. Just for that. Think about where that power comes from. That's energy they couldn't use for electric vehicles, for data centers, for their own grid.
And building new power sources on that scale is...
It's next to impossible today. A new hydro dam like Hoover, forget it. New nuclear plants take decades. The alternative is burning more natural gas or coal, which completely contradicts their entire green transition strategy.
So Canadian aluminum isn't just a commodity.
No, it's a massive, irreplaceable source of low-carbon energy savings for the U.S. economy right now.
And Carney made it very clear that if the U.S. doesn't want it, someone else will. Europe, Asia. They're ready to buy.
Which makes the U.S. a convenient customer, but not the only customer. And that's the fundamental change in thinking.
But then he brought out the real ace in the hole, the thing Washington needs for its entire future.
The critical minerals. The Ring of Fire development up in northern Ontario.
This is the real future-focused leverage, isn't it?
It's everything. These are the materials, nickel, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, that are non-negotiable for building EV batteries, advanced defense systems, microelectronics. For the U.S. to secure its supply chains away from, let's say, less stable parts of the world, a stable Canadian source is paramount.
And this is where Carney issued that direct warning to Washington. He said, access to the Ring of Fire is a potential opportunity for the U.S.
But, and this is the key part, it's not an assured opportunity.
That's putting it bluntly.
It's the very definition of strategic sovereignty. He then said very explicitly that Canada has other partners around the world, in Europe, for example, who are very interested. The message couldn't be clearer. The U.S. has to compete. They have to get in line.
For decades, the whole strategy was based on this idea that Canada had no other choice, that geography was destiny.
And Carney is just systematically taking that assumption apart. He even used Australia as an analogy.
Right, an island nation that has to ship everything.
Exactly. And yet, they're one of the most successful trading nations in the world, with huge trade relationships all across the Indo-Pacific. If Australia can do it, Why can't Canada with better infrastructure and more resources?
It repositions the U.S. from being an absolute necessity to just being one good option among several.
An option that now has to offer fair terms. And this isn't just talk. You can see it in the infrastructure they're building.
You mean the investments in expanding port capacity in Montreal and Vancouver?
That and developing Churchill, Manitoba as an Arctic gateway, plus the LNG pipelines to the West Coast to serve Asia. They are physically building the alternative trade routes as we speak.
So they're walking into these CUSMA talks with a portfolio of options already in place.
A portfolio of options, new trade deals with Europe and the UK. They are not coming to the table empty-handed.
Now, there was that one interesting subplot about Premier Ford's Ronald Reagan ad, which some people claimed had derailed a previous steel and aluminum deal.
Right. A reporter asked Carney about it directly.
And his response was just all business, no drama.
Total strategic clarity. He just confirmed that, yes, they were close to a deal,
Yeah.
and that those terms are, from Canada's perspective, still on the table.
So no finger pointing, just let's roll it into the main negotiation.
Meanwhile, Ford, being Ford, doubled down and called it the best ad that has ever been run, and joked about how you need the calm economist and the bulldog. That dynamic is clearly working for them.
So if we're looking at the balance sheet heading into these talks, Canada walks in with leverage, with options, with alternative buyers for its most critical assets.
And the United States walks in with a list of demands about milk and bourbon. The message, at the end of the day, is that the era of Canadian capitulation is over. This is about Ottawa seeing itself as an essential partner.
A partner with things the U.S. desperately needs to run a modern green economy.
Carney and Ford have signaled that any future deal has to be based on mutual respect and equal benefit for Canadian workers and families. Everything else is, to use his words, not negotiable.
So if the U.S. wants that stable access to 4 Hoover Dams worth of green energy and the minerals from the Ring of Fire, history and geography aren't enough anymore.
They have to bring something new to the table, something more substantial than just asking to sell their consumer goods.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider as all of this unfolds. Now that Canada has shown it won't trade its industrial future for access to its dairy shelves, what new compelling value proposition will Washington actually need to offer Ottawa to get a real deal done? Something for you to discover. We look forward to hearing what you find out.